Chris Ransom, and joining me tonight to break down the 2018 MLB Draft is my good friend Brandon Lane. He's an avid college baseball follower like myself, and we're going to break down what happened in the regional tournaments for college baseball tonight and then talk MLB Draft a little bit afterwards. Welcome, Brandon.
Hey, man. Thanks for having me.
No problem. You seemed really passionate about baseball, and there were a bunch of games on the day. There was one that had a football score, which we'll get to in a second, but the game you watched was Tanner Burns and Auburn playing Northeastern. And Auburn crushed Northeastern 13-4 as I expected. They just absolutely destroyed my mother's alma mater. Just brutally destroyed them. I take no pride in saying it, but they won thanks to Tanner Burns and some power bats. Tell me about the game.
Well, and actually, it was powered by a lot of freshmen because, as you said, Tanner Burns went 7 2/3, gave a couple runs, one unearned, which really makes me angry. That's not the worst thing that can possibly happen in baseball is an unearned run. But he was looking strong. He got through some really ugly first inning. They actually loaded the bases on him, and he got out of that with no damage. And he gave up a solo shot, which the kid crushed a really terrible pitch. Like, I didn't even know, first of all, how he made contact with it, not less how he put it over the fence. But the offense got powered by Edouard Julien, who's better known in Auburn as the Canadian Crusher. He's actually from Quebec City and was drafted in, I think, the top 15 rounds. So he was a really prized MLB prospect. And then Stephen Williams, who hit a 3-run shot and ended up hitting a 2-run double as well.
Yeah, and Auburn was one of those teams that it felt like they could have done something in the SEC tournament, but they've got a chance to rebound, and to make matters better for them, Casey Mize will get the start tomorrow against the North Carolina State Wolfpack, who are playing right now, I believe. They might be playing a little bit later, but they are warming up for a game this evening. Oh wait, they're playing Army. They're playing the Army Black Knights on ESPN3. If you have Comcast, you can get all the ESPN3 games for free. I have that at my apartment. It's pretty nice. So yeah, because you can watch college soccer on ESPN3. You can pretty much watch whatever on ESPN3. But yeah, going back to Auburn, I feel like they're going to win this regional, and they want to show the world they got denied that #1 seed, and they're motivated, they're poised, and I think Casey Mize is going to give it his all and have a big game tomorrow after losing his last 2 starts.
Yeah, he's actually lost his last 3, counting the Texas A&M start in the SEC tournament, which is really weird because he's lost, like, I think, 7 or 8 games in the last 2 seasons. So, losing 3 straight is not something this guy likes to do. And also, there's extra motivation in the fact that the region they're in is being hosted by the team who got that 16th regional host, which was what a lot of people thought Auburn would get. So to be able to get the Supers, they got to beat an NC State team who a lot of people in Auburn and a lot of people around the nation actually think robbed them of a regional host. So there's extra motivation there, and there's just extra motivation because of how they got put out in the regionals last year. They lost to Florida State on an extra inning walk-off, bases loaded hit by a pitch. Which, that's got to sting, and it's got to be in the back of the mind of Butch Thompson and everybody else around the plane is just how heartbreakingly, bad that loss was. And after they had fought back to tie it up and got it into extras just to lose like that.
Yeah, that had to be rough. And speaking of the Florida Gators, they played the Columbia Lions this afternoon, and the Ivy League champion, I believe. And Columbia was ahead early, it was 2-1. I was tagging you, and I remember on Facebook bringing up this conversation about how Columbia is ahead of Florida. Let's see if it can last. And then I found out that was from an hour ago, and then Florida had a 8-3 at that point before winning 13-5, and they are pitching Brady Singer tomorrow. So they're pretty much in the Super Regionals unless Brady Singer just because this will be Brady Singer's first start since his injury, and we'll get to Brady Singer a little bit later when we break down the MLB mock draft, but Florida's pretty much in the Super Regionals, and the Florida-Auburn series is going to be huge because you mentioned how Florida needed extra innings to beat them, and it honestly does feel like Auburn's the one team in the entire tournament that could upset them. I honestly do get that feeling, but what were your thoughts on this series? We'll break down one more series before I go over the final scores of these games and get into the MLB mock, but what were your thoughts on Columbia and Florida? I think we both knew that Columbia didn't really have much of a chance.
Well, like going back all the way to the SEC tournament, people were talking to me of the guys I know down here in the South. They're like, well, Florida kind of, underperforming in the SEC tournament. It's another didn't. Florida didn't have to do anything in this tournament to solidify what we already knew. They were the number one seed in the country going into this tournament. So, if you're Florida, first of all, you wanted to get Brady Singer back. That's your number one ideal going into this tournament, is to get him back. So you don't pitch him in the tournament. You get put out by a really game LSU team who was motivated just to get in the tournament. So that's why they were playing out of their freaking mind the entire tournament, because they wanted to get into a regional. So Florida won a few games in the tournament, and then they got prepared for this. And they started off slow against Columbia, and then kicked it in, and now they're going to show you what everybody else did, that Florida's the team to beat in this tournament. So I wouldn't be scared if I was a Gator fan of how slow they started against Columbia, because at the same time, that's going to happen.
Yeah, Florida didn't win the SEC tournament last year, and they still ended up winning the entire College World Series over LSU, who I believe won the SEC tournament last year. I'm not certain. I don't remember who won the 2017 SEC tournament. I think it was LSU, but I don't quite remember for certain. Yeah.
The problem with dictating who's going to win, or who's going to do very well in the College World Series by who does well in the conference tournament, is there's so much different levels of things to play for, because not everyone's playing for the same in conference tournament. But you got a team like LSU who's playing to get in the tournament. You got a team like Auburn who's playing to host. Then you have a team like Ole Miss who's trying to play into a top 8 seed to be able to host the Super. So there's different levels of what everyone's playing for. So there's not necessarily going to be every team in the conference giving everything they got to win the tournament.
Yeah, that's true. And I know South Florida did lose to Oklahoma State today 9-2. That's not a game I'm going to break down in depth because they didn't pitch Shane McClanahan, the guy that everyone thought they'd pitch. So they could save him for tomorrow. And then you've got, after that, you've got, you can pitch McClanahan in the elimination game, so that helps, I guess. Kent State's playing Louisville. They got a hit on Louisville. That game just started. So a lot of these games, these late games, are just starting. And they're regional games. The field of the college baseball tournament's at 64 right now, and it's going to be down to 16 once we know who's in the super regionals. So we're going to go from 64 to 16 pretty quickly. And the one game that stood out to me that I want to talk about real quickly before we get into the mock is the Oklahoma versus Mississippi State game. And I didn't have plans on mentioning this game, but Oklahoma beating Mississippi State 20-10, I have to mention it because that is a football score. 20-10 is not a baseball score, it's a football score. And there's this player on Oklahoma who I think is a top 10 pick who reminds me of Mike Trout named Steele Walker, and Oklahoma just swung the bats, 22 hits, 20 runs in a 20-10 victory over Mississippi State, which is no lightweight. They're quite a formidable team in the SEC. So to get that many runs is spectacular, and they got 9 of their 20 runs in the 7th inning. They played Mississippi State. Mississippi State had a 10-7 lead heading into the 7th inning. And Oklahoma got 9 runs in the 7th inning, which is just ridiculously good. So, to get that many runs and to produce that much is just off the charts as far as talent goes. And I'm guessing Steele Walker was injured, I guess, because Steele Walker is not in the batting lineup. I don't know if he's injured or what the deal is, but he did not play in this game. Their best prospect, he didn't play in this game. Maybe he'll move down as a result, but either way, you got to be stoked if you're an Oklahoma fan, because to beat Mississippi State 20-10 in a regional game, that's just phenomenal work by their school.
Yeah, it's really impressive to beat a team like Mississippi State, who's always been known to have strong pitching, and that really anchors their team. Because as we were discussing Auburn, the guy who really built Mississippi State as a perennial powerhouse in the SEC was Butch Thompson as their pitching coach for so long. So that's impressive, and Oklahoma's going to be possibly the team to beat out of the Big 12 in this tournament. Since Texas completely dropped an egg in the Big 12 tournament, that was completely shocking. Because when you think about Texas, you think that's probably the Alabama of college baseball.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd agree with you there. And Kent State does lead Louisville, who lost the ACC title to Florida. They just scored, but we'll focus on the MLB mock now. I'm going to quickly get through this so we can both get on with our evenings, but we're going to start with the Detroit Tigers at number 1. The rumor is that they're going to take one of 5 players, according to Jim Callis of MLB.com. They're looking at Casey Mize out of Auburn, which is no surprise. They're looking at Joey Bart out of Georgia Tech. They're looking at Brady Singer out of Florida. They're looking at Alec Baum, the Wichita State third baseman, and they're looking at Matthew Liberatore, the top high school pitcher. I mean, Nick Madrigal out of Oregon State's my top college batter, and he would be a nice replacement for Ian Kinsler, but he's not who they're looking at number 1, according to Jim Callis. So I think the Tigers have pretty much set on Casey Mize and Joey Bart. I don't see them taking Alec Baum. He went 1 for 4 against Nebraska. I don't see them taking Brady Singer after missing the SEC tournament number 1 overall, even though he won Baseball America's Player of the Year. And I just don't see them taking Matthew Liberatore because a high school pitcher's never gone number 1 overall. A left-handed high school pitcher's never gone number 1 overall, the modern era. I mean, Liberatore is a lefty, so that's why I think this is basically a contest between Casey Mize and Joey Bart. And if Casey Mize does a bad game tomorrow, I could honestly see the Tigers flip-flopping at the last minute and taking Joey Bart because Joey Bart won ACC Player of the Year. Joey Bart would be ready by 2020 when their catcher's 30 years old and has a contract that expires. And I could see their GM saying, you know what, we're going to flip-flop and take Joey Bart, even though passing on Casey Mize would be like when the team picking before the Detroit Tigers passed on Justin Verlander in the 2006 MLB Draft. Justin Verlander was the top player in that draft, and he fell to the Tigers at 2 and probably should have gone first overall that year, but Luke Hochschiver of the Kansas... No, wait, that's 2006. I thought Verlander was in the 05 or 04 draft. So I'll pull that up for a second. Yeah, the Padres took Matt Bush out of Mission Bay over Justin Verlander, and that's something that haunts the Padres to this very day, knowing they could have drafted Justin Verlander, and they didn't. That's something that's haunted that team for years, and the Tigers don't want to be the Padres. They don't want to be the team that passes on Casey Mize for another batter only to have that player not pan out. You don't want to be in that situation. So I think they're comfortable with right-handed pitchers. They drafted Porcello out of college. They got Casey Mize. I think they're going to take a right-handed pitcher at 1. And when you look at Mize, their workload than Brady Singer, more durable, more strikeouts, more velocity on his pitches. Even if Casey Mize does have some flaws on tape and some things he needs to work on, they brought their entire analytics department in when interviewing him. Like, everyone on their analytics team, everyone in their scouting department. They had like 100 people asking him questions, and they turned it into a press conference. When you're that invested in a player, you usually take him. So I think the Tigers are taking Mize, unless their owner and GM decides to flip-flop and take Joey Bart. But I think that's pretty much set in stone. And I think the Giants are going to take whoever the Tigers pass on, whether it's Joey Bart or Casey Mize from the reports I've heard. But what are your thoughts on those first two picks?
Well, another interesting thing that Detroit did for Casey, they brought him in for a full job interview. And when I say that, I mean a corporate-style job interview. Like, they asked him questions that they would ask someone who they plan on actually hiring for another position. Which that's kind of interesting because they're trying to see how marketable he is as a player. And if you're that invested to where you want to know the non-baseball side of things, that pretty much says how much you actually like a prospect. I mean, personally, my thought is that if you're going to take a batter, number one, you just take Nick Madrigal. The kid has like minuscule level strikeout in the Pac-12, which is easily known as one of the top baseball conferences in the country, year in and year out. And I just don't like taking catchers that early.
Yeah, I like Joey Bart. I think he could be the next Buster Posey, but at the same time, Nick Madrigal's just as capable of being the next Jose Altuve, according to a lot of scouts. And I think Madrigal is the best batter in the draft as far as plate discipline, as far as not avoiding strikeouts and getting on base consistently. So if I know this and I'm the Tigers, I'm taking Casey Mize number one. He's been a Tiger at Auburn. He's ready to be a Tiger in Detroit. And you've got Alex Faedo. You've got Matt Manning, the son of David Manning, a former NBA CBA player. So you've got quite a bit of players in your system. And I think once the Tigers realize Ron Gardenhire's not the right manager for this team, they'll have Matt Manning ready in the MLB. They'll have Faedo in the MLB. They'll have Casey Mize in the MLB. And all they have to do is hire a manager that's not Bobby Valentine or not Ron Gardenhire, and they will have the pieces to dethrone my Cleveland Indians as that team to beat in the division. It's just a matter of them getting all those pitchers in the majors by developing them and getting rid of Ron Gardenhire, because I don't think Ron Gardenhire's the long-term guy for the Tigers. I think he's just a stopgap while these guys develop in the minors. I think they're going to hire someone else who's better once these guys are ready. I really feel that way, Brandon. But they're going to be a great team to watch down the road.
Yeah, and the thing about drafting safety is you don't necessarily have to have him be an ace immediately when he makes his debut. Because after talking about all these guys who are in the minors and not ready to come up yet, they still got Michael freaking Coleman. You know, like, he's still sitting there at the top of the rotation. And if you want to throw ace money at him, which I wouldn't be against, you've got your ace right there, so all these guys just have to be supporting pieces in the rotation. So you're not necessarily putting the world on his shoulders by drafting him, even if you draft him number one, because when major prospects get up to the MLB, we don't really remember their draft status as much as we do other guys. Like, nobody remembers Aaron Judge was a pretty decently low pick to be as talented as he is now. So we don't really remember draft status that much as we do in the other three major sports in the U.S. So you don't necessarily, like, even if you get drafted number one, you don't have all that pressure on you that you do in the other sports.
Yeah, I'm going to quickly list all of Casey Mize's pitches before I break down the Joey Bart pick to the Giants in my mock, but I gave the Tigers Mize over Joey Bart, but I honestly think they're only considering those two players. I think they're that far in the process that that's what they're going to do. But with Mize, you've got a 95-mile-per-hour four-seam fastball, a 93-mile-per-hour two-seamer, a 91-mile-per-hour splitter, an 84-mile-per-hour power curveball, an 83-mile-per-hour slider, a 75-mile-per-hour curveball, a 74-mile-per-hour split change with a mix of splitter and changeup, and a 73-mile-per-hour changeup. So that's 8 pitches. Every time I counted one of Mize's pitches, I lifted up one of my fingers. So I read through all the pitches in my write-up, and I got 8. It's rare to find a pitcher that has 8 different types of pitchers heading into the MLB draft. So you can see why passing on this guy is just out of the question. He led Auburn in ERA as a freshman, too. So.
And that's weird. I got in Keegan Thompson on the roster, who's now in the Cubs system. and they drafted that guy in the 3rd round.
Yeah, I loved Keegan Thompson. I had a 2nd-round grade on him last year. I thought he was going to be a really good pitcher, so that was a great pickup by the Cubs, and I remember talking about how the Cubs got a big steal with him last year. So that's my thoughts on Casey Mize. San Francisco, I think they're going to take Joey Bart or Casey Mize, depending on what the Tigers do at number 1. I really believe that. I feel like they're locked in on that player. I think they should take Nick Madrigal at 2. That's what I would do if I were the Giants. I would take him, put him with Posey and Longoria, and try to win another World Series, or I'd try to get Brady Singer at 2 if you wanted a pitcher. But I don't think the Giants are going to do that. I think they're set in stone on Joey Bart or Casey Mize at 2, depending on what the Tigers do. So I gave them Joey Bart for that reason. And you got anything you want to add before I get to number 3? Because you pretty much said earlier that if you're going to take a college batter, you should take Madrigal, and I completely agree.
Well, my thoughts on Joey Bart, now this is going to come off as me, like, not necessarily being a part-time, but that's not true. I love Joey Bart. I think he's a great prospect, and you can actually make him the catcher of the future. Nick Madrigal is as polished as a college batter you're going to find. The kid checks all the boxes when you're looking for what you want in the core of your lineup at the 1, 2, or 3 spot. And with catchers, take longer to develop than any other player in the system besides maybe a pitcher. If you're going to make that guy the future of your franchise, are you really willing to mortgage the franchise for 5 years while he gets ready in the minors? Or do you take a guy with Madrigal, put him next to Brandon Crawford and put him in the infield, because he plays the spot, he can play short of the second. So he's got a little bit of versatility there. He's got some speed, he can run. So you put him in the top of that lineup, and he's ready in 2 to 3 years once he makes it through the lineup.
Keith Law of ESPN said today that Nick Madrigal will be ready by August or September of 2019. Keith Law of ESPN said that in a transcript with a White Sox draft site today. And we'll get to the White Sox in a little bit. I just wanted to point that out because if you got a guy, if you don't have a second baseman on your roster who has 0 home runs, and you can get a second baseman who's ready by 2019, you pull the trigger. This is not rocket science. I mean, I think the Giants should take Madrigal at 2, but I feel like they're going to screw this up and take Joey Bart. And they're going to keep him in the minors for 5 years. Bart will be a good player, but he won't be as good as Madrigal, and that's what we'll look back on when the Giants drafted this guy and he's up after Buster Posey. But there's also talks that Buster Posey might move to first base, so we'll see what the Giants do. But let's move on to the Philadelphia Phillies at number 3. This was tough for me because the Phillies could go 3 routes. They could take Alec Baum out of Wichita State. His fielding percentage is horrendous. They could take Madrigal and move him to third base, which I'm on board with. They've got J.P. Crawford. They've got Scott Kingery out of Arizona. If they want to make Madrigal their third baseman, that he's going to have to transition to that in the minors, but I think he can make the transition because he's like Nick Senzel. He can play anywhere in the infield. And I remember Nick Senzel out of Tennessee a few years ago. I went on the Cincinnati Reds show, but we'll get to the Reds in a few. But I think Brady Singer's the guy you take here. Baseball America Pitcher of the Year. He can be just as good as Casey Mize when he's healthy. And you have Aaron Nola, who's playing at a Cy Young level right now. And you have Jake Arrieta from the Cubs. That's it. That's your rotation. The rest of your starting rotation is awful. And Brady Singer's a guy who could fix that. So I think if you're the Phillies, you cannot pass on Brady Singer at 3. You don't have the luxury to pass on Brady Singer. Even though you could get one of those college batters or you could get Jonathan India out of Florida, there's a few combinations and options, but I think Alec Baum, his fielding percentage is below 900. That's a little bit concerning. I like Madrigal, but I'm not sure he's the best fit for the Phillies, so I think Brady Singer's the guy you have to take at number 3 if you're the Philadelphia Phillies, knowing you've only got 2 good arms in the majors, and Singer can be that long-term number 2 guy behind Nola. What are your thoughts on that before I get to the White Sox at number 4?
You know, really like Brady, and and he would definitely be the guy I would pick to go number one if there wasn't a guy by the name of Casey Mize in the same conference. But I like Singer. He's got electric stuff. For a guy that age, what I've noticed with Singer and Mize is Singer is a more power guy that wants to overwhelm you with his stuff. The breaking ball got sharp break on it. The fastball is electric. And he's a guy that punches you out by just overpowering you. And that works, especially when you've got that much movement on your stuff. I mean, that works. Mize is more of a surgical approach. And that's fine, especially in today's MLB when you get a lot of strikeout guys, and a lot of the best hitters in baseball still strike out a lot. So either one of those guys are going to be high-quality starters for 10 years. But if I'm the Phillies, you got to take Singer. Because, like you said, the other guys in that rotation, they're not MLB ready. They're just there because the team was terrible last year. So that's the only reason they're in the majors right now. And they're competing for playoff spots. You can't send those guys down. You just have nothing to bring back up to replace them. So, yeah, I'm taking Singer. It won't take him that long to get ready. And even if it does, you've got a really young arm that's pitching out of his mind. And then you've got Jake for a couple of years as well. So, yeah, I'm taking Singer, and I'm really not looking back on him either.
Yeah, I'm with you there. Brady Singer at 3 is just the most logical pick. Chicago White Sox are up at number 4. They have 2 young infielders that are 23 and 25 years old. That's why I think they'll pass on Madrigal. Would it be an awesome selection? Yes. Have they scouted him extensively? Absolutely. They have scouted Madrigal. They could end up proving me wrong and taking him, even though they have 2 really young batters. They've got a young second baseman and a young third baseman that are both hitting well. They've got a first-round shortstop they drafted in Tim Anderson. They've got Jose Abreu at first base. I don't think they're taking Madrigal. They took Zach Collins out of Miami a few years ago. I think they're getting another pitcher to complement Carson Fulmer and Carlos Rodon, who can both be effective when they're healthy, but are both injury-prone at the same time. So this is a tough situation for the White Sox because the top college pitcher on the board at number 4 is Shane McClanahan. He had an ERA of 8.24 in conference play at South Florida this season. That's not a guy you take at number 4. And these other SEC pitchers, not named Rollison, or not named Brady Singer, not named Casey Mize, their reach is at number 4. I like them. Rollison's good. Higel's good. They're good pitchers, but their reach is at number 4. The best college player on the board, which is Madrigal, and they might have to wait 5 years or 6 years to play him, which would suck for him because I think he's ready as early as right now. It's just the White Sox have such a good core of young infielders that I don't think Madrigal would get a chance to play on the White Sox unless one of those infielders got injured. Even if he worked his way through the minors quickly, he'd be a backup until one of those guys went down with an injury in the majors, so he'd get to watch and learn from the team. I guess it could work out, but he's not a guy who would make as much of an impact on Chicago as he would as a team like Detroit or the Giants. So I just don't like the fit. So I went Matthew Liberatore, the top high school arm, at 4. I know Chicago rarely takes high school players, but if you want a pitcher at number 4, you have to take a high school arm this year like Liberatore because I just don't think McClanahan's worth a top 5 pick. I don't think Jackson Kowar's worth a top 5 pick. I love Blaine Knight as a reliever, but he's not worth a top 5 pick. And after Brady Singer and Casey Mize, I don't see any college pitchers that are worth a top 5 pick. And I think you can make an argument that Liberatore is worth a top 5 pick. So I think if you want a pitcher, you got to take Liberatore. But if you just want the top college player on the board, go with Madrigal. It really depends on what you want because I think the Reds are going to take the player you pass on at number 5, which is why I gave the Reds Madrigal. But any thoughts on the White Sox and Reds before we get to 6 through 10? Because I know... Go ahead. You have
the problem with the White Sox is all the best players on the board there, you've got a spot for it. Like, Madrigal is amazing, but I'm a giant fan of Yohan Moncada, the guy they got from the Chris Sale trade, which now seems like years ago, but it was only 2 seasons ago. He's fantastic. he's a guy that could possibly carry your lineup if you didn't have another guy named Jose Brady there. And Brady at first, you got Tim Anderson, who's secretly been a really, really talented player for you there. And you just don't really have a place for him regardless. Even if he flies through the minors, are you going to trade Moncada when you just got him in a trade for your ace? You're going to trade Tim Anderson when he's just down there in his prime? So that just doesn't make sense. So Liberatore is basically the guy that I say he's a reach in the top 5, but at the same time it's kind of bad reach. But like, I would take him in the 7 to 8 range. But if you take him at 4, I'm not losing sleep over it. Especially when after you get past the arms you mentioned earlier, you really don't have anything in the rotation besides those two. And none of the other guys you have are anywhere close to being ready. Liberatore is a guy who's got a really high upside, not necessarily as polished as the other college guys, but then again, he's a high school arm. You're not expecting him to draft a high school arm and he comes out for his young. That's just not going to happen.
Yeah, and and Liberatore caused the top high school batter to go 0 for 3. So that should say a lot about his tape.
Yeah. I love the kid. He's got a giant upside, but at the same time, he's just not anywhere close to ready right now. But that's expected. His reading is amazing. He's probably one of the best high school arms that have came out of the draft in a decade, and he's not even.
Yeah, you can argue he's the best high school arm since Dylan Bundy back in 2011. You can definitely make that argument for Liberatore. Because I do get a sort of a Dylan Bundy vibe with him. And then the Reds...
Sorry, my aunt kind of came in and just told me she was leaving, but go ahead.
Yeah, the Reds... I gave the Reds Nick Madrigal at 5. Their second baseman is... The Reds' second baseman's not having the year he was hoping to have, and if you have Nick Senzel at third base and you have Madrigal at second base next to Joey Votto, and Joey Votto's still playing, because Joey Votto's got like a 5-year contract still. So if you can get Madrigal at 5, you can bring him up, and then by 2020 you're going to have Senzel, you're going to have Madrigal, and you're going to have 1 or 2 more years of Joey Votto giving those young guys guidance. So that is an awesome thing to have if you're the Reds, and you're building that infield the way the Cubs built their infield, because the Cubs had a lot of top 5 picks. They got Chris Bryant, they got Kyle Schwarber, and Kyle Schwarber went through the entire minor leagues in a year, which kind of surprised a lot of people, because he was good, but you didn't think he would work his way through the minors that quickly. So that's how the Cubs built their World Series team, and I feel like the Reds, if Madrigal's there at 5, they can take the same approach the Cubs did, and they'll have Senzel, they'll have Madrigal, they'll have Hunter Green waiting in the minors, and the big beauty with Hunter Green is you can put him at shortstop to solidify that infield, or you can bring him in as a pitcher. So either way, you're set, and you're going to have a lot of the pieces in place, but I think they're going to take their time to groom Hunter Green and focus on building the infield and making that the force that it needs to be. So Madrigal would be an A-plus grade for me if the Reds took him at 5, because they do need a second baseman, and pairing him with Danny Senzel and Joey Votto is just scary. Or Nick Senzel out of Tennessee, who they took second 2 years ago.
Yeah, I love the Madrigal pick for the Reds just because it's a giant pick, and you can get in my honest opinion, the best player on the board who's probably worthy of the number 1 pick, and you're getting him at 5. So that's a home run pick. You can bring him up in 2 years, maybe even quicker than that, because it's such a big need. Like Gleyber Torres for the Yankees came up through their entire system from the Trenton Thunder all the way to the majors after Tommy John surgery. He did that in a year.
Yeah, the Reds were my biggest MLB draft winner in 2016 and 2017, so if they got Madrigal in 2018, they would be my MLB draft winner for the 3rd year in a row, which is just scary. This Reds team is coming. They have a lot of guys in the minors. They've got 13 players in the top 20 of their minors that could be on their MLB roster by 2020. This Reds team is coming. They suck right now, but they are coming. Once they get all those guys, they might miss on 3 or 4 players, but they're going to hit all the rest of those players. And once they get all those guys up, they're going to be ready to take this division. So the Reds are coming. They're not going to be there yet, but Madrigal's a huge addition for them, and that's going to definitely bolster them. We'll go through 6 through 10 right now. The New York Mets. I think the New York Mets are either going to take Jonathan India or Alec Bohm here. I have Alec Bohm as my number 3 college batter, so I gave the Mets Alec Bohm, but you could argue Jonathan India is the better player. And I think whoever they pass on is actually going to fall to the Orioles at number 11. As crazy as it sounds, Brandon, I think whoever they pass on is going to fall to the Orioles at 11. And it's going to be in large part due to teams that have reached for mediocre players in the past, like the Padres picking at 7. The Braves might take the guy they want at 8, but I think the Braves are locked in on a high school player from Georgia. And then you've got the Athletics and the Pirates at 9 and 10. I mean, after we get to the Mets taking one of these third basemen, this is the part of the draft where you're going to see one of these teams, whether it's the Padres, the A's, or the Pirates, one of them is going to do something really stupid, and we'll get to those teams in a second. But I think if you're the Mets, you've got to get David Wright's successor with this pick, and you've got 2 batters, 2 third basemen, Jonathan India out of Florida and Alec Bohm out of Wichita State, who would both be awesome fits for that successor role. And I went with Alec Bohm, but I could see why Jonathan India would warrant this pick as well, considering he did very well and basically carried that Florida team versus Arkansas in the SEC tournament.
Well, it's funny that you pick Bohm because he's completely on the Jonathan India train for the New York Mets. And here's my reasoning. I'm even going to go as far as saying if I'm an NL team, I don't touch Bohm at all. He's probably going to be off my board. And here's why I say that. If I'm an AL team, I'm taking him because it's quite simple. I can DH him. You know, he doesn't have to feed the field for me unless they're playing NL competition, which very, very rarely. So, you know, you can DH him until he actually learns how to field his position at a high level. With Jonathan India, he's already very good defensively, and as you said, he can carry a lineup with his bat. That Florida lineup's not too shabby. When you look at all the bats that are in it, it's not a bad lineup, and he carried it for the second half of the entire season. So,
Yep.
I'm taking India. You got to have a guy that can field your position, especially in an NL park. The Mets don't really have any really good bats in that infield, unless you're really high on Rosario. I think his name is. He's a really stud prospect, but Ahmed Rosario, I think his name is. So I'm really high on that kid. But at the same time, it's kind of all you have in the infield as far as bats go. You're fine in your pitching. You don't need anything there. So I just think India makes the better pick because he's a really good defensive guy, and that swing is gorgeous.
Yeah, India might actually be a better fit. Even though I have Bohm higher in my rankings, India played better on tape against Arkansas, and the big concern with me with Alec Bohm is the fielding percentage. Anytime you have a fielding percentage of below 900, that's alarming. And I think a lot of the teams are saying, oh, Alec Bohm is this 5-tool bat. He's batting well, he's hitting a lot of home runs, he's a can't-miss player. But the thing that a lot of these draft sites are doing is they're only looking at Alec Bohm's offensive game. They're not looking at he has 5 errors throughout the season, he's got a fielding percentage of below 900, which is concerning. So they're not looking at that. And I think this is a problem with a lot of teams that take batters. They only look at what they do offensively instead of what they do offensively and defensively as far as fielding goes, quick arm. I mean, he checks out every box except for fielding percentage. So I would take him, but at the same time, I definitely understand the Jonathan India pick. And really, after the Mets, there really isn't a team outside of the Orioles that's in the market for a third baseman. So I think Alec Bohm could slip to the Orioles at 11. I think India could as well. And I'm going to mention why. But that number 7 pick, I went with Steele Walker out of Oklahoma. He didn't play in today's game, but the Padres, they need a center fielder. And I feel like they're going to reach for someone. They're either going to reach for Steele Walker or they're going to reach for Travis Swaggerty. And I don't even consider Steele Walker a reach because he looks like Mike Trout on tape, but he's 5'11", 190 pounds. He's kind of small. but he plays like Mike Trout on tape. So if you're that confident in him as I am, why not take him at number 7 and save some slot money?
Yeah, I'm actually a really big fan of Swaggerty, and I don't even think he's a reach in the top 10 because I'm not sold on this outfield class as a whole, especially the center field class. So I feel like those two guys, their value is going to be higher just because after them, what are you going to get if you need a center fielder and you're taking one in the first round? After those two guys, you're not getting value where they're getting taken anyway. So even if you reach for those two guys, they're not going to be there if you get past like 20.
Yeah,
so
the Padres' next pick is at 38.
Especially if they're such high, like, in your needs, which is a problem. If they're in my top 2 or 3 needs and I really need a center fielder, I'm not going to be very upset if I reach on either of those guys.
Yeah, and the thing with Steele Walker is you look at the Padres' core. I'm going to quickly break this down. You look at the Padres' core. They brought in Eric Hosmer. They moved Will Myers to right field. They got Travis Jankowski, a first-round pick out of Stony Brook. People thought, I think I trashed that pick on a podcast back in 2012 when I was starting, but Travis Jankowski has been the man with Will Myers being injured. You've got an underrated Christian Villanueva who had 10 home runs at the age of 26. He could be the long-term third baseman if he improves his batting average. You've got a nice shortstop in Freddie Galvis who you picked up in free agency. I mean, San Diego really has an underrated core of batters, but they need a second baseman, a catcher, and a center fielder. And there's no way Madrigal or Joey Bart's dropping to 7. So if they do, you take them and you go ha-ha like Nelson Muntz, knowing you just got Nick Madrigal at 7. It's like, if Madrigal falls to 7, the Padres GM can basically just laugh at the other 6 teams like Nelson Muntz, point his finger, and knowing he won the draft. But they got Mackenzie Gore last year, and I honestly feel like they can get a pitcher with their second first-round pick at 38 if they love one of these center fielders. And I think that's what will end up happening. They'll reach for a guy and they'll save slot money.
There's gigantic value there if you can somehow be able to get a guy like Rollison or Kolar or even the Hedgel kids from Kentucky. I would be betting that one of those 3 end up falling to 38 just by like what would happen there. So if you're able to get your center fielder of the future and you're able to get a high guy like your 3rd or 4th starter in the draft, you're taking that to the bank in the first round every day and twice on Sunday.
Absolutely. So we'll break down the Braves at number 8. I gave them Ethan Hankins, my number 2 high school pitcher from Forsyth Central High School in Georgia. And Ethan Hankins has 4+ pitches, but he missed some time with injuries. The velocity on his arm decreased this season. So if the Braves look past that, it's because they did their due diligence on Ethan Hankins. He's pitching again, he's healthy, but that's the thing. It's like, if they pass on him, Ethan Hankins is going to take a huge fall in the draft. He's going to fall to the 20s because everyone's going to say, oh, the Braves passed on Ethan Hankins. He's healthy, but he dealt with injuries this year. That means the Braves know something. He doesn't check out medically, and teams are going to start panicking. Because it's like, if Ethan Hankins doesn't go at number 8, everyone's going to get worried and start doing more medical research on him, and then he's going to fall much further than he should have. But I think Ethan Hankins to the Braves is the player they're going to take at 8. He's got the upside to be an all-star down the road. There are questions with durability and velocity, but he's got a 4+ pitch arm, and he didn't miss any extensive time. He did get injured. His velocity dropped, but he didn't miss any extensive time, so I'm willing to look past the injury. And Ethan Hankins is a guy that if the Braves pass on him at 8, he could fall to the end. So he's a wild card. Yes, he's got 4+ pitches, but the possibility of him dropping in the draft is there.
Yeah, and I like the pick for Atlanta, and a lot of my reasoning here is you can stash the kid in the minors for a longer period of time if it's needed. If he needs to take time to recover from any injury, because he said he's healthy. But at the same time, if he needs a little bit of time to get back to top form, so you can put him in the fall league or something like that. And you've got a guy in Kyle Wright who, if you didn't have Julio Teheran, that would be a guy I think could be your future number one at one point. But you've got Julio Teheran, who, in my opinion, is one of the, probably the 20 best pitchers in baseball, maybe 15, and on a good day, possibly 10. So you've got a lot of options in your rotation. So you don't necessarily have to have the kid come up in 4 or 5 seasons. You can let him sit down there, and when he's ready, bring him up. So I like the pick just because you're not going to get very much value in anything else that you need. Any other pitcher is a reach. Even a guy like, even a Rollison, any of the SEC guys are a huge reach. Even Kolar, who I would be perfectly okay with taking top 15, he's still a reach. So that's just the best value pick. And even if you're concerned about the medical, just give him a couple more months to get ready because you're not in any hurry to bring him up once he gets there.
Yeah, I agree with that. And you look at number 9, the Oakland Athletics. They're picking at number 9, and I gave the Oakland Athletics Shane McClanahan out of South Florida. This is a guy who we talked about at the beginning of the year earlier, and we said, oh, he's in the same class as Casey Mize and Brady Singer. Had an ERA of 8.24 in conference play. His ERA went up to like 3.56 after being at 1.56. So I think he's going to drop, but I also think a team's desperate enough to take him in the top 10. One scout compared his mechanics to Greg Maddux, so if you believe there's a guy with Greg Maddux-like mechanics and you can get him at 9 or 10, that's fantastic value. And I think Billy Beane sees that, and I think he's going to say, well, this guy could end up being one of the steals of the draft, and that's why I think the Athletics or the Pirates, one of them is going to screw up in the top 10. Billy Beane, Neil Huntington, one of them is going to screw up this draft. You know it. Because I remember I loved the fact that they took Puck out of Florida at 6 a few years ago, but I thought they reached in last year's draft. So McClanahan at 9 is a good pick. It's not a big reach, but it is the best pitcher on the board, the best college pitcher. There isn't really another high school pitcher worth taking in the top 10, and the Athletics, they have got a lot of good batters. They need a pitcher more to complement those guys. So to get McClanahan, that's a nice value pick for Oakland at 9. And I'm just curious what your thoughts are on that selection before we get to the Pirates at 10 and the awesome Pirates rant you told me you were going to go on before the show today.
Oh, I have to hold myself back to keep from making this gigantic rant on everything I hate about everything concerning Pittsburgh baseball. But on Shane McClanahan, I like the kid. I was raving about him when we talked a couple months ago, and I still think he's in that category with a Mize or a Singer. He just needs more work than Mize or Singer. And that's not a bad thing because when you look at how polished Singer and Mize are, terrifying. Those guys are guys that could be up in your major league rotation in 2 seasons. And for a pitcher to be up in 2 seasons through your entire minor league system is ridiculous. So either of those guys, I think, are way ahead of anyone else that's in this class. But McClanahan is a guy that upside-wise is right there. He's not as polished and needs more work. But then again, you don't have to have him be an ace immediately because you traded away Sonny Gray and in comes Sean Manaea, who's just no-noed Boston like 2 months ago.
Yeah.
You got a guy you can build around there, and he doesn't have to be the number 1 immediately.
Yeah, and the scary thing is I had Sean Manaea like 4th on my 2013 board. I remember I had Mark Appel, Jonathan Gray, and Chris Bryant as my top 3, and then Sean Manaea was my number 4 player that year. So Manaea's lived up to the hype, and I think a lot of the other experts were concerned with the injuries he had at Indiana State, so they panicked and waited, and the Athletics got a huge keeper in Manaea, and now he's playing like the guy I thought he was capable of, and now you get McClanahan to complement him, and you can develop him. So that's the thing with the Athletics. That's a nice pick for them. McClanahan's not a top 5 pick like he was the beginning of the year, but he's done too much on tape to move out of the top 10. So I think 9, Oakland's a very good spot for him. And The Pittsburgh Pirates are up at number 10. This team, they've got a great batting lineup, strong bullpen, and a remarkable manager in Clint Hurdle who's fighting to keep his job, but they have the worst owner in sports, an owner who makes Gus the Groundhog look like the Chuck E. Cheese mascot. You know, Gus the Groundhog from the Pennsylvania Lottery. Clint Hurdle makes not Clint Hurdle. Clint Hurdle's awesome. I apologize, Clint. I was referring to Bob Nutting, the Pirates owner. Bob Nutting makes Gus the Groundhog look like a saint. I mean, there's no other way to put it. It's like if we did a Pennsylvania tournament of two biggest jerks in Pennsylvania, the finals would feature Bob Nutting and Gus the Groundhog. That's our championship.
Yeah.
But yeah, Bob Nutting. The Pirates are looking at a high school pitcher at 10, as well as Stetson's Logan Gilbert. I gave them Gilbert because the only high school pitcher I would take here at 10 is Ryan Weathers. And we talked about this before we went live. His dad is David Weathers of the Yankees. You want one of these rings, son? You can't sign with the Pirates. Go to Vanderbilt, son. You want one of these rings? You're not going to get it with the Pirates. And he's just going to keep telling him that. And I feel like if the Pirates took Weathers, he wouldn't sign with them. He'd go to Vanderbilt instead. I think it's one of those rare situations where you're torn, but you end up going the college route because you don't want to play for the Pirates. And we saw Lapel return to Stanford because he didn't want to play for the Pirates when he fell to 8 in 2012, which was the first draft I covered. So now you've got some high school guys like Carter Stewart, who lost a home start to Mason Denneberg, Cole Winn, who rounded out with the top 10 of my high school pitcher rankings, who I mocked the Pirates at 36, by the way, and Grayson Rodriguez, who didn't even make my top 10 high school pitcher rankings. Those are the three high school guys the Pirates are considering at number 10. And while I like all those guys, they're not guys you take at number 10. I think Bob Nutting knows he can sign those guys and pay them less money. And even Travis Swaggerty's a guy I can see the Pirates taking. Yes, his batting average is less than 300, but let's replace McCutchen with a guy whose batting average is less than 300. That's the most Pirates thing ever. That's a classic move on their end. I think the smartest thing they can do is get a business analytics major like Logan Gilbert at Stetson, went to Corey Kluber's alma mater, and you don't have to pay him a lot of money and he'll sign with the Pirates. But the Pirates are not going to do the simple thing. They're going to find a way to screw this up. This is the pick in the top 10 I'm the least confident in, is the Pirates, because I know they're going to find a way to screw this up come draft night.
Yeah, the problem with Pittsburgh is, first of all, getting rid of Garrett Cole and Andrew McCutchen is disgraceful. It's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard in my life. And first of all, the Astros stole that man. They went and kidnapped him out of Pittsburgh and brought him to Houston. But no matter what you get back out of that trade, it wasn't for getting rid of Garrett Cole. And as you can see, he's pitching lights out just because he gets out of that cesspool that is Pittsburgh. That's all it took. It didn't take a mechanic switch. It didn't take, giving him an extra day off. He got the hell out of Pittsburgh and became what Garrett Cole was supposed to be. Shame on you, Pittsburgh.
Well, Garrett Cole's a number 3 starter. Pirates treated him like a number 1 guy, so it wasn't a good fit. It's like, when he had to fight for the job, he was in his prime, and he had his best year in 2014, because he had a lot of good veterans competing with him, like Burnett and stuff, Charlie Morton, and now he's teammates with Charlie Morton again in Houston, but he had veterans pushing him for that number 1 spot. That's when the Pirates were at their peak a few years ago. Then he became the number 1 guy. He really didn't have to work for anything, and now he goes to a team like Houston, where you've got Keuchel, you've got Morton, you've got Verlander, and he's got to work every single day at being the best pitcher he can be just to keep that number 3 spot in the rotation. So, and it fits him better. Yeah. So that's why he's much more successful there.
When you've got Lance McCullers and Charlie Morton nipping at your heels, if you mess up for 1 week, you're getting dropped in the rotation, because those 2 guys are probably 3s or 2s in most rotations in baseball. That's why, even if you went to New York, I think the production would have been the same, because he's not going to be anywhere in the top because you've got Tanaka and Severino, and you've got like Sabathia and Sonny Gray nipping at your heels to take your spot. So I think that's all that Garrett Cole needs is he needed motivation. And you're not going to get any of that in Pittsburgh because the owner is not even motivated to actually put forth a team that's halfway deep. That roster should not be bottom of the barrel. It shouldn't. There's guys in that roster with a bat in their hand who can carry a lineup. Like the Bell kid that they got in the middle infield, or the corner infield, he's great. And that kid can swing a bat like nobody's business. And he's getting wasted out there in Pittsburgh. There's so much talent on that roster, it's putrid that they're so bad. And all it is that they have a pathetic owner. Nobody, if you're a free agent, don't even look at Pittsburgh. Don't. Find somewhere else. Take less money to find somewhere else than Pittsburgh. And if you're a guy like the Weathers kid, you go to Vanderbilt 20 times out of 20. First of all, when has Pittsburgh ever been known for developing guys in their minor league system that are worth a damn? Besides, well, McCutcheon. But that's just because he had more God-given talent than most people would ever dream of. You didn't really have to do much developing with that guy. And I would even argue that you regressed Garrett Cole instead of developing him. He got worse. So at Vanderbilt, you're going to get a team that you go to that's proven to put people in the MLB if you can throw. They just got a first-round pick last year. So you sign there, play 3 years, and go be maybe a top 5 pick.
Yeah.
So I'm going to actually be a little bit better on Pittsburgh than I originally intended. I'm going to keep it easy because the biggest joke here is just pointing out that they're Pittsburgh at this point. I don't even have to say anything else. They just say, look at that shit. That's it.
Yeah, Pittsburgh has a lot of issues. If they can fix their rotation, they've got the tools to be a good team down the road, but it just feels like they've only got 1 or 2 good starters, and they only have 4 starting arms in their rotation. I don't understand what they're doing. You need at least 5 starters in a rotation, and if you like having substitute starters as well as relievers, you need 6 or 7 guys. So to go into a rotation where you only have 4 guys in your starting rotation, that is horrible management. And I'm not blaming Clint Hurdle for that. I'm blaming their pitching coach because, Hurdle's done a remarkable job when you consider the lack of star power the Pirates have this year. The fact that they're winning record, they were in first place. I would take Jonathan India here if he fell to 10, but the Pirates are not going to take Jonathan India because Bob Nutting is too cheap to draft Jonathan India. He even tweeted last year that taking players to save money is more important than taking the best player on your board, which is not true if you ask Kevin Colbert of the Steelers or Jim Rutherford of the Penguins. They will say the exact opposite. So the Pirates, this is why the Pirates are the Pirates. I really don't have any other comment to make.
Yeah, you can't even call them the Cleveland Browns of the Major League Baseball anymore, because that might just be an insult to the Browns.
Yeah.
That might just be an insult to Stassi Brown and to John Dorsey, because those guys actually look like they're getting something together. And my biggest problem is in Major League Baseball, at the same time, there's a very player-friendly draft, but if you look at any of the rookie contracts in the 4 major sports, it's the most team-friendly in the MLB as well. They just got the best overall draft process of anybody. Because you get 5 years of team control. That's exactly what you get in the NFL. If you draft a guy in the first round, you get that with all of your draft picks. Not just the first rounders. You get that with everybody. So, at that point, if Jonathan India, you draft him, you get him for 5 years. In my opinion, you're so worthless at third base that you get him up there in 2. So you've got 3 years of team control in the majors, where you can either trade him away if you think he's that valuable of a piece that you can get an actual star for, or you make him the cornerstone of your lineup, and then you re-sign him in the 3rd or 4th year.
Yeah, Jonathan India is the player you take here if he falls to 10. I gave them Logan Gilbert only because he broke Corey Kluber's strikeout record at Stetson, and because this is a guy who's smart, business administration's an analytics major, and he's a player you can get without overpaying him. I get that you want to get a certain player, but Logan Gilbert, he majored in business systems and analytics, which means he's smart. Corey Kluber majored in sport management. This guy majored in business systems and analytics. So he might be smarter than Kluber, and he broke Kluber's strikeout record. So if you think he's going to be as good as Corey Kluber, you might as well take him and make him the ace of your franchise here at 10, because you don't have to pay him. He went to Stetson. He went to Stetson. He didn't go to Florida. If you go to an SEC school, you can leverage the situation and command a lot of money. This guy went to Stetson, and he's really friendly and really outspoken, so I feel like he would take whatever the Pirates offered him. So you get a good player and you underpay him. That's a smart pick for the Pirates to make. And they're going to take a player they can underpay no matter what. So even though they should take Jonathan India. And speaking of Jonathan India, he's finally off the board at 11 to the Baltimore Orioles, who they replaced Manny Machado right off the bat with Jonathan India. And this ends up being an excellent pick for the Orioles as they capitalize off of the idiocy of these teams that passed on Jonathan India in the top 10.
Jonathan India is going to be that guy that he's going to have one team that passed on him where he's basically like Manny Ramirez was to the Yankees or David Ortiz was to the Yankees, where he is just tearing a team apart. And it's going to end up being one of these moron GMs who pass on him.
Yeah, it's going to be one of these guys who ends up passing on him. Or if Jonathan India goes to the Mets, I think Alec Baum would fall here. I just get the feeling that after the Mets, there really isn't a market for third baseman. The top high school player is a third baseman. The top high school batter, Nolan Gorman's a third baseman. Jonathan India is a third baseman. And Alec Baum's a third baseman. So if one of those guys goes to the Phillies, the other guy will go number 6, and then the Orioles will get the other player at 11. Or we'll see all those guys go off the board. But either way, I'm going Jonathan India to the Orioles. And speaking of Nolan Gorman, I have him going to Toronto at 12. He's raw, but he's got the upside to be a power hitter and really make a difference and really be a 30 home run hitter down the road. And luckily for Gorman, he can take his time. You've got a 32-year-old Josh Donaldson who still has a few good years left with the Blue Jays, and you can groom Nolan Gorman to be that successor to Donaldson. You don't have to rush him, so it's a perfect fit for Nolan Gorman. So I went Nolan Gorman at 12, and this is where the high school batter run begins in my mock. But what are your thoughts on these two picks before I get to 13 and 14?
If I'm Baltimore, after I take Jonathan India, I'm calling the city of Pittsburgh to thank them for being so stupid.
Yep.
Because if you get India outside the top 10, you've won your draft. Like, you don't have to hit on anybody else in that draft. If you get India at 11, that's a pretty high value pick. And then for Nolan Gorman, the idea of Nolan Gorman and Vlad Guerrero Jr. in the same lineup 5 years down the road is pretty terrifying if you're anybody in the AL East. As a Yankees fan, that's terrifying.
Yeah, and they drafted TJ Zook out of Pittsburgh, who we actually interviewed on this podcast in the first round back in 2016. So they're going to have Zook, they're going to have Guerrero, and they could have Nolan Gorman. That's scary. They're going to be back. Yeah, they're going through a rebuild right now, but they're going to be back down the road. You know it.
Yeah, there's an infield prospect there that's supposed to be really, really good, too, besides Vlad Guerrero Jr., and I can't remember. I think he's a middle infield prospect. Maybe a shortstop, and I can't remember, but he's the defensive guy out of all of those guys, because Vlad Guerrero Jr., of course, in my opinion, he's a 5-tool hitter. He might be a 5-tool player, period, because he's got the arm strength that Dad Vlad had. Yeah, that was purposely run. But he's got the arm strength that his dad had. He's definitely got the pop that Vlad. He doesn't wear the batting gloves, which is just great. And probably the best moment of like this preseason was when he hit that bomb in Montreal to walk off wearing his dad's old jersey. So he's going to be a superstar. So now you've got your franchise cornerstone, I believe, because Vlad's amazing. So now you just get complementary pieces. And after Donaldson leaves, why not replace him with another power bat?
Yeah, and Gorman can play anywhere in the infield, too. So if they want Vlad Guerrero at third base, they could put him there. But I also feel like they could play Guerrero in the outfield, and they could put Gorman at third base. So either way, it works for Toronto, and they get the top player on the board, the top high school batter in the entire draft in Nolan Gorman. Miami Marlins, they get Derek Jeter gets the son he never had at 13. Bryce Terang out of Santiago High School. Now, this is a guy that MLB.com has him falling to the 20s. But this is the thing. At the beginning of the year, everyone had Bryce Terang in the top 5 of their mock drafts. At this point last year, everyone had Bryce Terang in the top 5. I felt like Terang was not worth a top 5 pick, but he's worth a top 15 pick. And now everyone's panicking and saying, oh, he's not worth a top 25 pick. The guy struck out once in 108 plate appearances last year. He's had a bit of a down year this year, but he's being cool, he's being laid back, he's being confident. He's not talking about how he needs to work on his mistakes. He's just forgetting about it and moving on. He has the attitude and mindset that you want a shortstop to have. And as far as mental discipline and plate discipline, I think this is the most mentally disciplined shortstop coming out of high school since Derek Jeter himself. His dad played in the majors after being a 50th round pick in the 90s. He's got 3 older sisters that played 3 different sports. I think this is the most disciplined high school player in the entire draft. Not the best power bat, but the most disciplined high school player from a mental standpoint. And for Derek Jeter to draft a shortstop who could be a Derek Jeter type impact player for the Marlins down the road is huge. And he can message him on Skype once a week to check in on his progress in the minors. And the Marlins can make this pick work. I think Bryce Terang could be a cornerstone player for the Marlins at 13. So this is Jeter's first draft because he bought the Marlins after they got Trevor Rogers in the draft last year. So I think they take Bryce Terang here. I know others are going to say it's a reach. I know other sites have Terang lower than this, but I honestly feel like this is a pick the Marlins could make.
Well, if I didn't already exert all of my negative energy in that Pirates rant, I could probably make just as good of a Marlins rant. I hated everything they did this offseason by getting rid of probably 3 of the top 50 players in the league, maybe 2 of the top 20 players in the league, definitely a top 5 player.
They traded Stanton to the Yankees and Yelich to the Brewers, I believe. So
yeah, you sent Yelich to the Brewers, you sent Ozuna to the Cardinals, you sent Stanton to my Yankees. Thanks, Derek. And in my opinion, they didn't really get a haul back, except you got Starvin Castro, who I'm extremely high on. I was kind of sad to see him go, but to get Stanton, that's worth giving up. And you got Lewis Brinson, who I'm pretty high on. I think he's a star, or going to be a star. So that's a cornerstone guy. But you traded away that many guys for Starvin Castro and Lewis Brinson. That's not a return that you're happy about. And it's not like you traded away old star players. Yelich and Ozuna are not even in their primes yet. They're still technically prospects themselves. Marcell Ozuna had his first breakout year, but you can't necessarily say he's like a superstar yet. So you traded away a core of prospects, except, of course, Stanton. But I really didn't get the trades. I didn't think they were smart. And I really just think that they panicked and said, oh, we don't have any prospects in the minors. Let's trade the team away to get prospects. And you still didn't really get high-level prospects except maybe 2. Starvin Castro's not a prospect. That's a proven talent. He's in his prime right now. So I didn't like it at all. But I really liked the Trevor Rogers pick before Jeter got there. So at least you got somebody down there. And I really like Terang, too. So those 2 guys would be a nice little piece along with Lewis Brinson down the road. So that's a nice little core.
Yeah.
But I just feel like even though they got a lot of prospects, you didn't get really any impact. Because I think Guzman, that might have been one of the guys that New York ended up sending to Miami. He's good. That guy could do like a thing. So that might be a pretty good pick. But at the same time, you didn't really get any franchise-changing prospects back except Willis Brenton, and you traded away 3 guys who would be cornerstones on their respective teams. So I just don't think it was any value, and they still have nothing in the rotation to this day. Nothing. Except, of course, their first-round draft pick.
Yep.
But other than that, nothing.
Seattle Mariners at 14. I went Tristan Casas out of American Heritage High School. My final top 3 high school batter comes off the board here, and the Mariners lost Yonser Alonso to the Cleveland Indians, so they get his replacement here. And he's the best player on the board, so it's a great fit for that reason, too.
Yeah, for the Mariners, I think that's a very, very good team. And it's a young team especially. So I really like the idea of replacing Yonder Alonso. He was in the talk to go to the Yankees a lot, and I'm glad they didn't pull the trigger on that because it's strikeout prone, and I really don't think you're getting the production that would counteract all those strikeouts because he's not a guy like Jerry Sanchez. He's going to strike out a lot, but hit 40 out. So I really like the idea of replacing him with a guy that's not exactly a strikeout machine, but can still give you a little bit of pop.
Yep. So that's the pick for the Mariners. The Texas Rangers, they get David Weathers' son, Ryan Weathers, out of Loretto High School. And this guy went 9-0 with an 11 ERA, a 0.11. So it's 0.1. His ERA is almost 0.1. But 20-0 in the last 2 seasons. He led his team to the state title as a junior. He got a no decision in the state championship, which Loretto lost, but it did not count as a loss in Weathers' win-loss column. So 20-0 the last 2 years. This is a pick you have to make if you're the Texas Rangers, because to get a player of Ryan Weathers' caliber, Gatorade High School Pitcher of the Year, son of David Weathers from the Yankees, who was a nice reliever on that 96 World Series team, to get him and stash him in your system, that is an excellent pick for the Texas Rangers. And David will tell his kid to play for Texas if they draft him. He'll sign with Texas. He won't sign with the Pirates, but he'll sign with Texas because Texas has history.
Yeah, I actually had an interesting question I was going to pose to you about the Weathers pick to Texas. Do you think the Rangers GM would be willing to offer the kid a little bit more money to make him consider not going to Vanderbilt?
I think he would, actually. That's the crazy part. I think he actually would. This is where most mocks have Weathers going. They have him going in this range. But there are some high school pitchers in this draft that are much lower on my board compared to other boards. And we're at that point where we're going to see a run in high school pitchers because of the upside and a lot of teams taking project guys. Carter Stewart, who's a consensus top 5 pick, is still on the board, but I don't even have him going to Tampa Bay because I gave them the pitcher that beat Carter Stewart on the road, Mason Denneberg at a Merritt Island. Merritt Island played Cole Wilcox and E.A. Ugali this year, and Merritt High went into E.A. Ugali and they beat the pitcher on they beat Carter Stewart. They beat Carter Stewart in head-to-head play. That's impressive when you consider that most MLB draft experts have Carter Stewart as the top pitcher in the draft, but he lost a home start to another high school pitcher that plays 3 different sports and has the attitude and the character you want. So I went against the grain. I gave the Rays Mason Denneberg, even though Carter Stewart's still on the board, and then I gave the Angels Carter Stewart. So that's sort of, and then I have, finishing up that run of high school pitchers, I have the Royals taking Kumar Rocker. And I think after this point, this is where you begin to see a drop-off in talent in the draft after these first 18 picks. But what are your thoughts on these picks, and do you think this is after this point where the Royals take Rocker, this is where the drop-off in talent begins to take place?
Yeah, I'm sort of a Carter Stewart believer. Not as much as a lot of guys. I don't think he's top 5. I don't think he's top 10. But if the team were to take him in the 11, 15 range, I wouldn't be upset because there's an upside there. But I do feel like Tampa's getting the better end of that deal because you got Archer, who I don't think's an ace. I'm not a Chris Archer believer. I think he's a great number 2, but I don't think he's got the mentality to be an ace. and there's locker room problems there between him and the guy that they're really high on in their system, who just had Tommy John. So you got to find another dominant personality to kind of settle that and to take control of that locker room. And I don't think Carter Stewart is that kind of guy. But, and yeah, I'll agree. After Rocker, then you get a sort of a talent drop off. I think also you get an upside drop off because I don't think that any guy like Rolison, Dijon, Blaine Knight, the only guy I think that can turn into a one in that entire group is Rolison and Kowar. And I don't think either of those are number ones. I think they project a very, very high shelf too.
I'm in complete agreement with that. And with that being said, I've got the Cardinals going Tristan Pompey at 19 to replace Dex Fowler down the road. He struggled 0 for 5 in the Auburn game in the SEC tournament, but that was really his only bad game the entire year, and you could stash him in the minors for 4 to 5 years and then groom him to replace Dex Fowler. Fowler needs that competition, someone to push him, and Fowler his batting average is like 136 or some really low number. So I know he won the World Series for the Cubs and took big money to play with the Cardinals, but he didn't pan out at center fielder, and they've already moved him to right field. So I'm already looking at potentially getting his replacement here with Tristan Pompey at 19 out of Kentucky.
Yeah, and I can't really blame the kid for having a bad game against Auburn because the freshman they threw ends up having the game of his damn life. You know, he'll never throw that well again. He's not even a guy that's projected to be top end of the rotation anytime soon. That was just a throw where Butch Thompson was like, screw it. We'll be able to get enough offense to push us through that game. And it ended up happening in the form of Edward Julian hitting a walk-off. But I really like the idea of fitting him in the Cardinals organization. He doesn't have to pan out immediately because you've got a pair of absolute studs in Dijon and then Tommy Pham. So both of those guys are offensive studs, so he doesn't have to pan out anytime soon, really. And Dexter Fowler is a guy that he can learn from in the form of veteran leadership, championship experience, and everything intangible. He's not going to get very much on the field, but Dexter Fowler is a guy who has a really good baseball IQ. He's a very intelligent guy, and that'll be a good stopgap for when finally Dexter decides to hang it up. You've got his placement right there. So, yeah, I like that pick for St. Louis. They seem to be one impact guy away from reclaiming their spot as the dominant team in that division.
Yeah, and they could also get Seth Beer out of Clemson at 19, too. That's another player they could consider, the outright fielder out of Clemson. But we're going to go to the Twins at 20. They made the playoffs, and they still got a top 20 pick. And the crazy thing is like, if the Cleveland Indians went 80 and 82 and won the World Series, they'd be picking in the top 20, and they'd be the defending champs. And it's like, at that point, the MLB would rewrite the rules so that the World Series winner has to pick at 30, because to have a losing record and to win a World Series, it's just not fair to the rest of the teams in the draft. And at that point, action would needed to be taken. But the Twins, even though they got the wild card last year, they pick at 20 instead of 21. They get Cole Wilcox, top high school pitcher, on the board at 20. I really don't have anything else to say about this pick. I mean, it's just the best player on the board, I guess, and reloading, getting more guys in your system. So,
yeah, you're not getting an ace at this point in the draft. If you're picking anywhere from 20 and on back, unless you just hit a 1 in a million money ball style, like absolute steal, you're not getting an ace. Luckily for Minnesota, they don't need an ace. They've got that Barrios kid who's phenomenal.
And they've got that other pitcher. They got Irving Santana, but yeah.
Yeah, Santana's got a couple more years. And didn't they sign the kid from Tampa, like the Oderossi kid or whatever?
Yep. So the Brewers. The Brewers.
Got a couple arms.
You go ahead.
you got a couple arms there. You don't necessarily have to have the kid end up being a number 2 or a number 3. He could end up being your number 5 starter, and if you get him at 20, I don't even think you're really complaining at that point.
Yep.
And they don't really just power bat at all, so Seth Beer doesn't really make sense. And when Seth Beer eventually comes up in your first-round mock, I do have a small little point to make how pissed I am at MLB Draft Scouts for one of the things they really criticize Beer on. So when we get to that, you'll hear a very interesting take of mine.
Yeah, when we get to Seth Beer, which is a little bit later, I kept him at 27, but there is a temptation to move him up to 23, and I'll mention that when we get to the Yankees pick. Because Brewers, I went Jared Kelenic out of Waukesha West High School, Wisconsin. There are people that think this guy's the top high school batter in the entire draft. I don't see that, but the talent is there. He's going to go in the first round, and if the Brewers, if there's a high school prospect in Wisconsin, and he falls to the Brewers at 21, even if they need a good pitcher, I think they're going to take the local kid in this situation, knowing that some mocks have him as high as 10 or 12, and it would be a value pick more than anything else. You've got Yelich, you've got Lorenzo Cain, you drafted Corey Ray out of Louisville, you've got a great system, but this is just another guy where you just stash him so that, because you've got Ryan Braun's successor in Corey Ray out of Louisville a few years ago, and Kelenic would either be the successor to Lorenzo Cain or the successor to Yelich, depending on who leaves the team first. But he'd have a ton of time to develop in the minors, and the Brewers is just a great fit for him because he gets to stay in Wisconsin. His family gets to stay in Wisconsin. They don't have to sell the house, so it all works out.
Yeah, and I think especially since he's a high school kid, being able to stay in your home state, being able to probably be able to play for your hometown team, because he was probably a Brewers fan. I know there's a very strong fan base up there in Milwaukee. He's getting to play there. They've got a very solid repertoire with coaches and with scouts. So I really like that pick. They do a pretty good job of developing people, and their manager is phenomenal. So me and a couple of Yankees fans were talking during the playoffs how if they end up canning Girardi, that they should offer an ungodly amount of money to the Brewers manager to be able to leave and come there. So he's amazing. So anybody you get to play for that team, their talent level is going to be elevated by just how good the manager is. And I do think managing matters in Major League Baseball. I know people are like, if you have a really talented team, managing doesn't matter. I don't agree with that, because are we really going to sit here and say that Boston would be going through this slump that they were in before, like after they went on that ridiculous hot streak? Are they really going to go through that slump with a guy like Francona instead of a guy like Cora? I really don't believe that.
Yeah. So, great job, great pick by the Brewers, the Rockies. Now we get back to some SEC pitchers you can relate to. I gave the Rockies Jackson Kowar out of Florida. We'll get to the Yankees in a second because I know they're your team, but Jackson Kowar out of Florida, I have him graded slightly higher than Sean Hagel, and I really do like Hagel a lot, but Kowar, there are people in the scouting community that have Kowar ahead of Logan Gilbert, which I don't agree with, but they have him as a top 15 talent. I feel like if he fell to the Rockies at 22, they would just grab him and develop him in their system. They got a lot of pitchers that they brought up. They've got the Jonathan Gray. They've got Riley Pint in their system. So they've got a lot of guys in their system. But it's a matter of putting everything together. And once they do that, they will be a force because they've already got the batters, but the window of opportunity to take this Rockies club and mold it into a special team is definitely there.
Yeah, I really like Kowar. I think after you get out of Myers and Singer, that is the next tier of SEC arms. I actually wanted him to fall to 24 because I want the Yankees to take him just because it's a value pick and just because they might not have Sonny Gray for a while. But I'll wait till we get to 24 to talk about that.
Actually, the Yankees are up at 23. The Cubs are up at 24.
So yeah, we're not that far away.
Yep.
But, when we get to there, I'll go in more depth about what I want the New York to take. but I love Kawhi. I think he could be a very solid number 2, and maybe even, especially in a place like Colorado where you're going to get a ton of run support, I probably think you could project as a number 1 if you develop him correctly.
Yeah, I had Kawhi to the Yankees in my last mock, but because I moved Jared Kelenic from the Rockies to the Brewers, I had to move Kawhi up from the Yankees to the Rockies. So he moved up one spot due to a domino effect in my in my final mock draft. So Kawhi could easily fall to the Yankees, but he moves up. He gets picked by the Rockies due to a domino effect. So I'm sorry, Yankees fans, but you still get a good pitcher in Sean Hagel out of Kentucky, who actually beat out Mize and Singer for SEC Pitcher of the Year as a true sophomore. And this guy could be a steal if you develop him correctly. But if you want to take a batter, you need to take Seth Beer if you want a batter. I know Carson Haley, who you're friends with, loves Seth Beer, and I think he said in Lombardi's draft talk that if the Yankees passed on Seth Beer, he'd break his TV. He'd probably destroy my HD TV if the Red Sox got him. Like, if the Red Sox got him, he's not just going to destroy his TV. He's going to destroy my TV, too.
Yeah, my rant with Seth Beer is there's a lot of scouts who don't think he's a first-round pick because they don't think he's going to be able to transition from hitting with BB Corbat to hitting with wood. And I think, excuse the language, but I think that's fucking ridiculous. Do you see these home runs? These aren't just like fence hoppers or, barely getting over the wall. These are moonshots this kid's hitting.
Yeah, this guy has 5-tool tape. This guy's a 5-tool batter on tape. I did a film session on Seth Beer, and I do agree with you that he's going to be one of the steals of this draft. I don't think he's got Aaron Judge upside, but as far as value goes, he's the Aaron Judge of this draft in terms of value. I'm not going to compare him and say he's going to be the next Aaron Judge, but Aaron Judge was drafted in like the 30s, I believe, in 2013. He fell way further than he should have, and Seth Beer is going to be the outfielder that falls way further than he should have and turns out to be a huge steal.
Yeah, I think it's ridiculous to think that his power is just going to disappear when you put a wooden bat in his hand. Because at the same time, yeah, it's easier to hit with a BB core bat. But when you're hitting the home runs that this kid's hitting, you could swing with a boat paddle and it's going out.
Yeah, and he won the Dick Howser Award as a true freshman, which is like the Heisman in college baseball. So to win the Dick Howser Award, the Heisman of college baseball as a true freshman, that says a lot. And he's the only player to do it, to win it as a true freshman. It's like, we haven't even seen a guy win the Heisman as a true freshman in college football yet. This guy won the Dick Howser Award, the Heisman of college baseball, as a freshman. So he's special, period.
And it's way harder to get on the field as a true freshman in college baseball than any other sport, in basically collegiate sports. Except maybe, I'll backtrack. The second hardest sport, because almost everybody has a true freshman starting in college basketball, because the one and done rule.
Yep.
But besides basketball, the hardest sport to get on the field as a true freshman is definitely college baseball. Because, speaking of true freshmen, there's a kid named Daniel Cabrera at LSU, and they were absolutely shocked that he was playing at the level he was as a true freshman. Because he wasn't supposed to be starting, and their shortstop, who was a really high-level guy in the SEC, got hurt, and he had to step in and play. So they were shocked he was even on the field as a true freshman. So that's impressive.
It is.
For Seth Beer to basically be the best player in college baseball in his true freshman season is just ridiculous.
Yeah, that's why he's going to remain in my first round no matter what. He might fall to the second round in real life, but he's a player I'm mocking in the first round because I believe the first round talent is there. And the Cubs, they got Ryan Rollison out of Ole Miss, and this is sort of where the SEC run ends until we get to Blaine Knight at 40, but this is the next SEC guy, and this is a great pickup for the Cubs. Rollison's a sophomore, but he's 21 in July. That's why he's draft eligible.
Yeah, I think he's going to be the key to making a really deep run. And I do think this is a team that can win the College World Series. And I think Rollinson's a guy that projects as a top end, maybe a 2, maybe a 3. And if you're the Cubs, you've got a fantastic system of evaluating talent and how you want to World Series. So you can stash him in your mind behind Brooks and Kyle Hendricks, Jorge Quintana. So he doesn't even have to be a 3. He can be a 4 or a 5, 2 or 3 seasons down the road. And that's where he'll be at until they lose one of those guys. And then he moves up the rotation. I really like it. He was dominant in the SEC tournament, including coming out of the bullpen to throw a couple of innings in the championship game against LSU. Ended up striking out 3 in like 2 1/3. So he's a real high-end guy. It's going to be a project because he's not necessarily as high upside as any of these other guys. But the talent's absolutely there.
Yeah, number 25, Arizona Diamondbacks, Adam Kloffenstein out of Magnolia High School in Texas. I'm going to give the Diamondbacks the best player on the board for upside. They need the top pitcher on the board. That's Kloffenstein. I'm not going to say anything else about this pick because there's a lot of other picks in the 26 through 30 range that I feel like are more worthy of an in-depth discussion, like the Red Sox, the Astros, the Nationals, the Cleveland Indians, and the Dodgers. Those teams are worthy of an in-depth conversation because they're fun teams to talk about. And even though the Indians are not a big market team, they're a popular small market team. They're probably the most popular small market team in all of baseball. So, yeah, I'm not gonna harp on the Diamondbacks, and maybe that's just the East Coast nature in me, but it's the Diamondbacks, and it's the high school pitcher.
Meanwhile, the Diamondback fans are coming at your throat because they're like, "Hey, we're in second place," and like at the Rockies' throat to first.
And meanwhile, Paul Goldschmidt's hearing this in the outskirts, and he's slamming a bat against a beanbag. He's swinging a bat at a beanbag, and a beanbag just broke because Paul Goldschmidt heard me saying whatever about the Diamondbacks. So Paul Goldschmidt just destroyed a beanbag, or a boxing bag. Not a beanbag, like a boxing bag. Like, you know those bags you use for boxing? Like the practice bags for boxing. Paul Goldschmidt just destroyed one with a bat because I trashed the Diamondbacks. So I apologize to the boxing company who makes that.
Yeah, but before we move on from the Diamondbacks, I'd like to give Paul Goldschmidt a shout-out as the best player nobody talks about.
He is. He really is. But any thoughts on this Diamondbacks selection? It's a high school pitcher, Adam Kloffenstein. It's the number 8 high school pitcher out of 10 on the board. I really don't have anything to say about this pick. And there's other teams like the Red Sox, Nationals, Astros, Cleveland Indians, and the Dodgers before I get to some of the compensation picks. And what I'm going to do to save us time is I'm just going to read through the compensation picks 31 through 43, and you can tell me your favorite compensation pick, and we'll just end the show after that. So... But we're going to get through 26 through 30, but we'll mention 26 through 30 in depth. But any thoughts on the Diamondbacks before we get to the Red Sox, the team that Ryan Moore and Brian Luis follow extensively in Lombardi's Draft Talk?
I actually think that Arizona can really make a World Series run with Los Angeles falling off the face of the damn planet the first half of the season. So I think that could possibly be a World Series contender, or at least an NL pennant. I think the winner of the World Series is absolutely going to come from the AL. That's just too stacked.
Yeah, I mean, I did my MLB season previews. The Astros, the Indians, the Red Sox, and Yankees all look like powerhouse teams. I think whoever comes out of the AL can beat a team like the Diamondbacks. I think if the Dodgers get back, then yeah, the NL could be a champion, but it's got to be the Dodgers versus the Yankees or the Dodgers versus the Indians. I don't see the Dodgers beating the Red Sox or the Astros in the World Series at this point. The Dodgers just have too many problems they need to clean up. But let's get to the Boston Red Sox at 26. Connor Scott out of Plant High School. He was teammates with Kyle Tucker, who went in the top 5, because Kyle Tucker was drafted 5th overall by the Astros back in 2015. And Connor Scott had to learn from him as a true freshman. And then he took over the outfield. So this is a guy you can stash, and you can develop him in the minors while Jackie Bradley plays out his contract with the Red Sox. So high upside player, and a player the Red Sox could stash. And Pawtucket, and then Portland. So, yeah.
Yeah, the Red Sox, as much as I despise them, for all the Red Sox fans who listen to the podcast. They're really great at developing outfield talent. Of course, their latest first-round pick, Phenom, in the outfield was obviously Andrew Benintendi, who ended up being the number one player on MLB Network, like top prospect. He's kind of having a sophomore slump, but that's kind of normal for all really great players, especially young prospects who are shoved into a large market team very early, a la Benintendi, Aaron Judge, those guys like that. So, yeah, I really like the idea of getting JBJ's replacement because it just seems like they're not returning him in the contract. But there's nothing really in Boston that tells you that they think he's going to be the guy long term. If whoever ends up signing him is getting a steal, that might be one of the 3-4 best defensive outfielders in baseball. So whoever ends up getting JBJ is getting a defensive cornerstone in the outfield, but Boston definitely makes a pretty good pick to do his replacement.
Yep. And then we get to the Washington Nationals at 27. They get Seth Beer. And by doing this, they can basically just... If they get Seth Beer at 27, the Nationals can just move on from Bryce Harper and reload. That's basically the logic behind this pick. It's like if Seth Beer gets to 27, you take him simply because you can reload. And if you don't want to pay Bryce Harper to re-sign him to a long-term deal, you can just draft Seth Beer and save a ton of money.
Yeah, my problem is like how casually you ended up like just moving on from Bryce Harper. Is the fact that the Nationals are so damn stacked they can move on to the second best player in the entire league. Like that's how offensively loaded they are. They can just look at Bryce Harper. He's the best player in baseball, not named Mike Trout, aka God. That you can just be like, we don't need him. We can save that $400 million and give it to some of these other stud young guys we've got. That's just insane.
It really is, and they can reload just like that if they get Seth Beer at 27.
Even if you lose Harper in that lineup, you've got Trey Turner, who's this good and he's still learning how to play the damn game. He's on the Major League roster, still learning how to play his position.
Yep.
Which is a testament to his natural athletic ability. Then you've got guys like Tom Eaton, Anthony Rendon. Ryan Zimmerman is still raking at what seems to be 72 years old.
Yep. And Seth Beer, I do have a film session on him on my Draft Utopia YouTube channel. He's the only player I did a film session on, and I did it like way back in March. But I am working on a Mize film session that's going to be set either tonight or tomorrow. I'm going to have that up, and then I'll try to work on a Brady Singer and Madrigal film sessions before the draft. We'll see what I can get done. But 28, the Astros. I gave them Grayson Ginesta, the Wichita State first baseman, who has been batting .313 or higher in all 3 years. He's a home run power bat. I feel he's a first baseman, and he's a top 30 player. So, honestly, that's a great pick for them. Grayson Ginesta, you put him with Correa, you put him with Altuve, you put him with Bregman. That infield's going to be loaded for the next decade. It's already loaded, but you put Ginesta with those guys, the Astros are going to be a dynasty.
Yeah, and I like the idea of getting a first baseman because, yes, Yuli Gurriel is a rookie, but he's also already 30. That's the kicker there. He was a 30-year-old rookie. So he's not going to be there for much more of, the 6-7 years. You might not even get 5 out of him.
If 30 is the new 40, I've got something I want to say. Might come off as offensive, but if 30 is the new 40, then a 30-year-old rookie is basically the equivalent of a 40-year-old virgin. Sorry, Steve Carell. It was a funny movie, but it's the truth.
That's good. I'm actually impressed with that. And if you look at Yuli Gurriel athletically, he does not look 30. That guy looks like he should be 22, just now coming up in the league. He is freakishly athletic for a 30-year-old man.
Yeah, he is. And we're going to get to my team at 29, the Cleveland Indians. They have 3 first-round picks. I'm not going to say suck it, Browns, because you had 2 top 5 picks and I didn't pick until 29. So when I don't pick until 29, I don't get to tell Browns fans that we have more first-round picks, because technically we only have 1 top 30 pick, but we have 3 first-rounders. The Browns had 4 picks in the top 35. The Cleveland Indians only have 2 in the top 35. So the Browns had more draft capital than us, and I gave the Cleveland Indians Tristan Beck, the top reliever in the draft, out of Stanford. And if Rob Manfred's listening to this, just know I will take the Chief Wahoo logo down off of Draft Utopia once we win a World Series. I will not keep it up forever, but I'm going to put pressure on you to corrupt a World Series for my team. It's been 70 years. It's been too long. I just want 1. I'm not going to ask for 5. I have 5 Super Bowls with the Patriots, so my parents met in Boston, so I just want 1 World Series. And I will keep the Wahoo logo up every year we don't win the World Series. So that's a promise. As soon as we win 1, I'll put the C up and I'll take the Wahoo logo down. But I'm not, no amount of money or steroids or juiced baseballs or any bribe of that matter will sway me. So but let's get to the Indians pick. I'm going Tristan Beck, and with Cody Allen and with Andrew Miller both set to be free agents, the Cleveland Indians could just draft 3 relievers with these first-round picks. It's a deeper reliever draft than it's been in years. They could just draft Tristan Beck, they could draft Blaine Knight, and they could draft another reliever, and then they could just quickly put those guys through the minors and then use them in bullpen roles. They could just reload like that if they wanted to. But I went Tristan Beck here. Tristan Beck's not as durable as Blaine Knight, and he didn't beat quality starters, so you could argue Blaine Knight's a better pick for Cleveland, but I feel like Tristan Beck going 7-3 as a starter with a 2.90 ERA, I think Tristan Beck can be the better pitcher if he's healthy, but you've got 2 guys, Andrew Miller and Cody Allen, who are going to be free agents next year, and Brian Shaw's also going to be a free agent. You got to get at least 1 reliever with those 3 first-round picks at 29, 35, and 41. If you're losing, and the bullpen's already struggled with Cleveland, even though it was good the last few years, the bullpen's already been our biggest liability. So if this is the best bullpen draft in years, you got to get at least 1 of the bullpen pitchers.
Yeah, ideally, if I'm Cleveland, I'm keeping either Cody Allen or Andrew Miller. I'm more inclined to keep Miller, but at the same time, I don't know what's gotten into Andrew. I don't know if it's like injuries or whether he's just declining, because he hasn't had an Andrew Miller-like season this year. Andrew Miller has been God amongst men for the past 3 seasons everywhere, but he's kind of had a human-like season this year, which human for Andrew Miller is still all-star, perennial, like all-world reliever. He's just not been untouchable like he has been for the last almost half decade. So I'm keeping one of those guys. I'm probably keeping Miller. And I'm getting at least one of those top-end relievers in this draft. And I'm actually going to be set. Because if you have a chance to keep one of those guys, you do it. You're going to have the money. Just use what you don't use to pay the other one, to pay the one you keep.
Yep. So that's a good pick, and you got to get a reliever at one of these picks. I think we agree that you got to bring back one of the relievers in free agency by re-signing him, and you got to draft a reliever with one of those 3 picks. I gave the Dodgers Travis Swaggerty. This is probably one of the biggest steals of the draft. Only reason I had him sliding this far is because the batting average is below 300. If this guy had a high batting average, I'd have him in the top 15. But he's versatile enough to play anywhere in the outfield, and the Dodgers, for some reason, this team just keeps winning the draft. They got Walker Buehler. In 2015, they got Jordan Sheffield. In 2016, they got Jared Kendall out of Vanderbilt last year. They've taken Vanderbilt players in the first round 3 years in a row, but there isn't a Vanderbilt player worth taking this year, so they get Swaggerty instead.
I actually have an interesting take on Swaggerty. I watched him in person this year, actually, when Auckland went down to South Alabama to play that one game. Beautiful field, by the way. And I actually got to see the kid in person.
Wow, that's awesome. Tell me more about that.
He had a pretty nice outing that day. I didn't see anything spectacular. What I did see is he's definitely got range. He can definitely move around out there, and that's not exactly an easy outfield to play because it's pretty big. So you got a pretty good amount of ground. And the swing is natural. He doesn't look like he's exerting any extra energy in the swing. It's mechanically sound. He can run fairly well for a center fielder at least. Like he's not got, I don't know, like Mike Trout wheels. He don't have that. He ain't got Aaron Hicks wheels, but they're good. And if you're the Dodgers, you gotta have something because I don't know what the hell's going on with that organization right now. I don't know if it's just like a World Series hangover because of that tragic loss in Game 7. I don't know if that's still going on. I don't know if it's because Kershaw's been injured, which he just got back on the DL after spending time on the DL. His first game back, he lasted 5 innings, and now he's injured again. So, I don't know what's going on. But you got to restock that farm system because you traded away a solid bit of it to be able to get that 6 months of Yu Darvish.
Yep. And I'm going to quickly read through the compensation picks. The Tampa Bay Rays have back-to-back compensation picks. They get 2 pitchers, Chris Bubik and Luke Bartnicki. You get these pitchers here, and you reload. The Royals have back-to-back picks as well as 33 and 34. So they get Jason Belois. He's the ace of Coastal Carolina's rotation this year, and he was actually, Coastal Carolina won the College World Series 2 years ago, back in 2016. They were just a group of misfits, and they won the whole thing as underdogs. And then Luke and Baker out of TCU. So some college players for the Royals. The Cleveland Indians, they get catcher Will Banfield, who I've seen go a lot higher in mock drafts. He hit a game-winning home run off of Ethan Hankins in the Georgia State playoffs. So to get Will Banfield this late, that's an awesome pick for Cleveland for their prospect system. And then the Pirates get Cole Winn, the Pirates are actually considering Cole Winn at number 10. He has an ERA of 0.29 and 8-1 this year in 14 starts. So the no decisions, you want to see him work on that and develop a few more plus pitches. Like his slider took 3 years to develop a slider, and he still hasn't developed a curveball. That's why I have a problem with the Pirates taking Cole Winn at 10. They take him at 35, I'm fine with that, though. And he's a high school player, so he might sign with a college team instead of playing for the Pirates. So that's why the Pirates should take college players, because they know they can sign the college player. You're not guaranteed a high school player if you're the Pirates. But then I gave the Orioles Jeremy Eierman out of Missouri State, 302 batting average. I gave the Padres Matt Mercer, the top pitcher on the board, at 37. The Diamondbacks, they got Cole Winn out of Orange Lutheran High School. Wait, I gave the Pirates Cole Winn. I thought I changed the Diamondbacks pick. I guess I didn't, but I gave them Grayson. I gave them a guy who's projected in the top 40. Grayson Rodriguez out of Central Heights in Texas. So, the Central Heights Blue Devils in Texas. I gave him to the Diamondbacks in the top 40. So, after putting Central Heights, we got Blaine Knight. So, we go from Central Heights to Blaine Knight. That rhymes, which is kind of crazy. So I thought I typed this pick. I forgot to type it. That's why you hear the keyboard noise in the background, but all right. So that's done. I thought I typed that pick in, but all right, let's get back to the Royals though. They get Blaine Knight at 40. Then the Cleveland Indians at 41. They get Parker Meadows, the younger brother of Austin Meadows, out of Grayson High School at 41. The Rockies get Mike Ciani, the top high school batter in Pennsylvania from Penn Charter. And then Brian Hoeing out of Louisville ends up going in the to wrap up the first round. The Cardinals draft another Cardinals. So that is my first round, my top 43. what was your favorite compensation pick? I think Blaine Knight to the Royals is the player you're going to probably end up picking here, but there is a drop-off in talent. After the first 15 picks, there's a drop-off in elite talent. After the first 18, there's a drop-off in elite to great borderline elite talent, and then the rest of the draft, it's just the rest of the draft is solid role players and future starters in the first round. So, what were your thoughts on this? Any of these compensation picks outside of Blaine Knight, and overall, any thoughts on the mock before we call it a show?
Well, I do want to point out the TCU pick because, if I remember correctly, didn't we have a conversation about 2-3 weeks ago about that very same kid and how that ERA was absolutely ridiculous?
Yeah, we talked about a 2019 prospect, how his ERA was through the roof, but Lucan Baker's one of the stud batters on TCU, and I gave him to the Royals as the first baseman to replace Eric Hosmer.
Yeah, I'm cool with that pick. I also think TCU picks. I don't know why. It just seems like they develop like MLB style guys pretty regularly, and it's just like a caliber program where you're always playing important baseball every single year. You're always playing Big 12 tournament games late in the year. You're always playing College World Series games. So there's that big game experience that I think that you got to have in a guy that you're going to build your batting order around. And for a team like the Royals who don't really have that, just to get up out of that lineup at all, besides Jordan, who's not what he used to be. So you're going to have to get an impact bat. So I like the idea of going with a TCU prospect there.
Yeah, I mean, the Royals got 3 first-round picks in the compensation portion as well as a top 20 picks, so they can turn this around if they ace all their picks in the draft. They could definitely turn this around. So there's definitely a lot of good players that could end up getting picked. There's players that could fall a lot more as well. I mean, there's guys that I have in this first round mock draft that are in the second round portion on Jonathan Mayo's big board on MLB.com. And the only reason I'm looking at that is because I want to see if there's anyone at Auburn besides Casey Mize that I can ask you about before we wrap things up. So I know Zach Hess is on LSU, but I'm not sure if you've seen him this year. I mean, I'm just Matt Mercer.
I don't actually think there's any Auburn guys that I would be getting drafted. He's not going to get picked anywhere in the top probably 20 rounds. But Andrew Mitchell might be the guy that goes like in the 30s somewhere. That would count. He pitched against Texas A&M. He was the guy that threw against Doc Daxis when Doc Daxis started looking like Nolan Ryan reincarnated. He pitched against them, struck out 8 of the first 12, 8 of the first 13. So that's the guy he might have played his way into getting drafted. But Auburn prospects during 2019 and 2020 was guys like Will Holland, Edward Julian, Tanner Burns, Stephen Williams, guys like that.
Yeah, there's a lot of players in this class that could end up being drafted. For Auburn's done a great job recruiting and adding more talent, and they're going to be a team to watch for in the future, I think. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
Them.
The thing about Auburn is everybody thinks that once Casey leaves, they'll stop being elite. Here's the thing, though. I think Tanner Burns actually projects just as high as Casey did, and Tanner is a hell of a lot better as a true freshman than Casey was as a true freshman. Because remember, Casey Mize didn't get drafted out of high school at all.
No, he didn't. You're right.
So he's going to try to be the first player to go undrafted in high school and then get drafted number 1 to Stephen Strasburg. That one ended up turning out pretty well for the Nationals, I would say.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, LSU's got some late-round guys, but looking at this list and looking at what's on the board, I really don't see anyone in the top 200 outside of Casey Mize, and I'm sure there are a few high school players in this draft that have commitments to Auburn, but what they do is going to depend on where they go in the first round. There's Seth Beer and there's JT Ginn, so you could draft Ginn or Beer if you want to boost your pitching or your batting, because there are some second round guys that I think could be sleepers. Noah Naylor, the brother of Josh Naylor's in this draft. I don't have him on my board because I know Josh Naylor was a first-round pick, but Josh Naylor had this incident in the minors a few years ago where he stabbed a teammate, and they never suspended him for it. It's like, if this happens in the NFL, you're out of the league. If this happens in NHL or basketball, you're out of the league. But with minor league baseball players, they're like college players, they're like kids, will look the other way. It's like, no. Zero tolerance on that. You got to step up, minor league baseball. You got to. You can't be allowing players, and that's why the Marlins got rid of Josh Naylor. But I like Noah's attitude better, but I don't like him as a first-round talent. I think he's a second-round player, and I'm not even sure he's a top 50 player. So we'll see what happens. But Noah Naylor did win the Home Run Derby in the All-Star game last year, so that's worth pointing out. There's a few other players in this class that really look like potential talents. So we'll see what happens. I mean, it was fun having you on, Brandon, and anything you'd like to say before we wrap up this recording?
Well, first of all, I want to thank you for the opportunity. It was really enjoyable. This is really fun to break down. College baseball is probably the sport that I guess I'm most passionate about because it was my favorite sport growing up. I played it didn't play college, but baseball in general, I played it for about the first 15 years. So it was really fun breaking this down. I'm actually really looking forward to the draft.
Me too. I mean, the first round's going to be on MLB Network. I'm not going to be posting grades for any picks outside the first round this year because last year I wanted to post the first 2 rounds and then MLB Network said, screw the second round, we're not going to cover it, we're not going to air it. So you forced my hand, MLB Network, you win. We're only covering 1 round because you guys decided to flip it over to a baseball movie or some other dumb thing after the draft. It's like, no, that's not okay. I'm not okay with that. So this is your punishment. Go back to the 2-round format. We'll do a 2-rounder in 2019, all right? Fair compromise. That's a fair compromise, I think. So Chris Ransom, Brandon Lane, thank you so much for coming on, man. And that wraps up this recording of the 2018 MLB Draft Special. And you can check it out in the archives on TalkShoe.